to this computer. Got it.
Yes. Okay. Okay. And now everyone can see the presentation.
Yes.
Right. Wonderful. Okay. So, thank you all again for your interest in this project. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be growing at Jax as part of the salsa program and seeing some really interesting stuff so far this year. And I imagine that there's a lot of questions and desire just to have more information to share on tours that are happening this season. So, really glad to have the opportunity to talk about my land to linen project that I'm working on here. So, who am I? Why am I here? I'm Ashley Gilbert. I am the founder of the Foothills Flax project. It's a project that was funded by Boulder County Sustainable Food and Agriculture Fund, and that was in 2025. And that was really the impetus for me to get going on this. It's something that I care a lot about, just the sustainable textile industry, and I'll get into that a little bit more. Um, yeah, and I'll share kind of an overview of what we're going to cover today. So I'll give you all a kind of an overview of my personal professional background and kind of introduce how I got into this world of flax farming, segue into how and why the Foothills Flax Project was really born, talk about the visions and objectives, currently ongoing future state, address some of the very common questions about growing flax and different types of flax, how flax becomes linen, and then contextualize specifically some of the things that I've been noting at Jack Solar Garden under the solar array so far this year. Okay, so definitely a non-linear path to flax farming. Funny, I'm just realizing that linear, that root LIN actually ties back to the word linen. It wasn't, I didn't register that whenever I put it in, but that's something just etymologically that is pretty relevant. And there's a really rich history, culturally speaking, around linen, its significance in humanity and just across the globe. So, um, yeah, I might sprinkle in some of those little fun details throughout the presentation, but I'll start by talking about my history, my personal career experience, and um, how I got to where I am now, which was definitely not a part of my 5-year plan at any point, but here we are. So, last year I gave a presentation to some high schoolers, kind of, and this is the graphic that sort of emerged, just telling them about who I am and what I'm doing. And in one sense, it seemed to really hit the simplified stages of my journey. You know, starting out, just what did I want to be when I grow up? I didn't really know, but I wanted to make a positive impact on the world. I did know that. Um, Kind of stumbled into corporate America, where I worked for a while as a business and data analyst in the financial services sector. Um, that also wasn't something that I'd ever seen for myself. So I got a little bit burnt out, decided to go back to grad school, see if I could reorient towards doing some good in the world. Um, Thought I would be using my experience as a data analyst to maybe get involved with sustainability reporting. Um, but the pandemic happened at that time, and there were yeah, just some different emerging opportunities and changes in the way that we work that led me to kind of double down on my creative passions and pursuits. So I'm a fourth generation seamstress. My great grandmother taught my mother how to sew, and that was how she fed and clothed and provided for her family. And I've been sewing since I was 5 years old. I remember making dresses for my Barbie dolls at home, and um, it's been kind of a back burner thing for a lot of my life. But in the last 5 or so years, I've opened up a custom upholstery and redesign business. So, kind of allowing textiles to be at the forefront of my work and what I'm doing. And um, let me see. Yeah. So thinking about sustainability reporting, I wanted to make a positive impact in the world, thinking that, oh, environmental causes impact us the globe over. It's not going to be a specific kind of social demographic. It's everybody is impacted by the climate and the environment. And in my work redesigning furniture, the idea was to make the most sustainable chair possible. And I thought, okay, how do I do that? One factor is using what's already on hand. So the circularity, reuse, kind of redesign. And the other consideration is using natural materials. So honestly, I just got frustrated. I was like annoyed that I couldn't find domestically grown and processed linen and started asking some questions about why. And so while I went to grad school and, had my sights set on some reporting initiatives, this kind of hobby in my back pocket really led me to the world of regenerative agriculture. So I had sort of an aha moment realizing that, oh, right, like textiles are grown in the same way that food is grown. People are a little bit, just generally speaking, disconnected where their food comes from. They don't have that same association with where their clothing or textiles come from. Um, so kind of discovered regenerative agriculture at the same time, then really leaning into the circularity waste reduction initiative. And, after all of this, or in the midst of all of it, I moved to Boulder and again, like kind of stumbled and fell into the local farming scene. And rather than, positioning these things as individual steps throughout my journey, I really see what I'm doing now as a combination of all of these different facets and experiences. So, yeah, I let me back up. So yeah, just kind of stumbling into the farming and agriculture realm here, I started seeing just the really incredible work that a lot of organizations are doing through grant funding. And it was just an idea that I had to pursue linen production and cultivation after asking these questions about why isn't anybody doing it here, knowing that or learning that flax is a native wildflower to our region. Just saw a real opportunity, which I'll circle back to a little bit later. So, what sort of emerged from just the work that I was doing and what I was studying was this idea of being a fiber activist. And for a long time, I think my work focused on the environmental issues of production and in the design industry, knowing that um, the emissions associated with the global supply chain, considerations of synthetic polymer based textiles, and wanting to address from that lens, but also kind of learned that, or just, yeah, realize that there's other ways to be a fiber activist too. So using these skills that I have for creation to raise awareness and put positive messages out into the world. This image is from a protest earlier this year, really kind of my first foray into public activism. And it was so uplifting the number of positive responses that I got from other people there who wanted to take a photo or really thought that they really connected with the message of putting love out there rather than hate. So fiber activism, I kind of see it as um, a couple different paths, but really a way to address both social and environmental justice. So the Foothills Flax project, again, this sort of came about through a combination of um, a combination of things. Just working at Yellow Barn Farm for those who are familiar, and working with drylands agroecology research, seeing the incredible work that they're doing with grant funding, local, state level, and federal grant funding. Um, Seeing that there's an opportunity for, okay, if this flax wildflower variety grows here without any irrigation, is there potential to cultivate a variety that could be used for linen that will also grow in a dry land setting without irrigation. Are ways off from that, but I still think that there's a lot of potential, which I'll get to. Okay, so just a kind of high level, the inspiration for the Foothills Flax project was positioning it as a collaborative initiative. I realized from the very beginning I'm not an expert in, I don't have a background in farming or gardening or growing anything. The first time I grew anything from seed was last year. And I also don't have any experience in industrial processing or, harvesting equipment, or I sew, but I don't really know how to spin. I don't have real experience weaving. So I just saw from the beginning that, this isn't something that I'm going to be able to do myself. And was really inspired again by the work of those around me to call in um, a community to bring this vision to life. So tying together local legacies of art and agriculture, there's a huge fiber kind of contingency in this region, as well as agriculture, which is something that I previously been aware of before I moved here. And I think that we're pretty well positioned to include fiber flax as a crop in our region. So these are some of the kind of high level uses and benefits. Um, Really, yeah, it's just there's so much that flax can do for us, for the land, and for humanity. I think not to get too prophetic, but um, yeah, so carbon sequestration, water conservation, kind of improving the water retention abilities of soil, removing contaminants. There's people that are looking at planting flax in um, areas where there's a lot of soil contamination and seeing how fiber can be grown in those contexts, whereas maybe food can't be. Um, you know, just prolific pollinator habitats. It's such a joy for me to see butterflies and dragonflies dancing across the flowers every morning. And yeah, it's really resilient to a lot of the common pests and challenges that farmers and growers in our region see. Grasshoppers don't like it. It's too fibrous for them to want to eat the stalks or leaves. And it has these small leaves. So the way that its growth habit makes it resilient to kind of late season hailstorms that might take out something with like a squash crop or something. Um, and the commercial uses are vast and plenty. So the Latin name for flax is Linum usitatissimum, and it actually translates to most useful. So in its kind of ideal state, every part of the plant is usable, whether you use it once or kind of reuse it again. So the flax seeds can either be eaten or they can be saved and replanted. Um, and you use the stalks. The flowers at one point were used for dye, even through the processing stages of creating textiles. There's sort of pre-consumer waste that occurs naturally, and linoleum once upon a time was used from some of that kind of the shed that happens from the plant. So whether it's used for additional kind of eco-friendly building products like that, or kind of directly made into pet bedding or hempcrete or something, there's a lot of potential for flax to truly be a zero waste and circular and regenerative product. So before I get too far along, I do want to address some of the most commonly asked questions. Whenever I tell people the name of my project or what I'm doing, they're like, flax, like the stuff that I eat? And they're like, oh, how much do you need to grow something, or how much do you need to grow to make something, and how much is required to make a women's shirt, for example? And I was like, that's the wrong question. And then how does it become linen? So I will get to the processing stage a little bit later, but I'll address these questions of edibility and volume and yield. So there are two commonly cultivated types of flax. And it's a little bit challenging because from a seed acquisition standpoint, because you can see they all have the same Latin name. Um, but there are specific cultivars that produce different types of fiber, and there's more like cultivar specifications, but really these are kind of the two that we see most often cultivated is the crown flax, which has this bushy, branchier structure. And that is, 99% of the flax that's grown in the United States right now is this crown flax. It's used for seed and oil. And more than half of that seed actually goes to animal feed. Um, Similar to a lot of other commodity crops that we've seen grown. What was really maddening to me, though, I was listening to an agronomist podcast, and these two men, so crown flax typically grown across the North and South Dakota, Nebraska, Montana, Minnesota regions. And this was a farmer in the Dakotas who, they were talking about their canola and their flax and how they love seeing the fields of yellow and blue flowers together. And after they harvest seeds, they're just left with this really woody material out in the field. It's kind of the waste product that they don't know what to do with. And I'm listening to this and pulling my hair out, just wanting to reorient growers to consider the potential uses of every aspect of the plant, not just to do things the way they are being done right now. So less than 1% of flax cultivated in the United States is used for linen, and none of it is done at a commercial scale currently. Most of our linen is imported from Europe, and yeah, I think there's a really great opportunity to change that. So there's crown flax, there's line flax, and there's a hybrid that is used for both seed and fiber. Um, I grew some hybrid flax last season. It was really beautiful flower. It has a bit of a branchier structure. I haven't processed it yet, so I can't attest to the quality of the fiber that's produced from either the line or the hybrid, but it, they do grow here. So I'll say that much. And then the question of how much do you need to grow something? And I was on the phone with my dad yesterday and just laughed because he's asking this question, almost 2 years into the project. And I tried to start off by telling people, well, that's the wrong question. There's not really a simple answer for that. Because if you think about it, you have to consider textile weight. So our denim jeans are made from, you can get denim that's 100% cotton. You can get canvas that's 100% cotton. It's really heavyweight. You can also get really gossamer like undergarments that are 100% cotton. So just contextualizing and considering that, oh, right, the amount of material or yeah, material that's used to make that. Further, if you're talking about how much you're growing and talking about acres, there's a number of factors to consider in what is produced. We all know that the quality of the soil, the amount of water, sun, weather patterns are all going to be influencing the what grows. So there's factors at the growth stage. There's also factors at the processing stage in turning this into from plant into textile. There's a similar number of opportunities to kind of go down various paths or adjust different equipment to what is going to ultimately be yielded in a usable product. And I have sort of an idealist vision that this can be an industry where the yield will dictate its use. So, maybe another factor is the time of harvest. So you could harvest before it goes to seed fully, which might yield a finer, kind of thinner linen fiber, or you could wait a little bit longer. You get the seeds that you can save and retain and replant, as well as fiber that might be a little bit more coarse. Um, so there's different ways of going about this, and my sort of thing is wanting to think about it kind of like we approach wine, where the wine industry is able to talk about different vintages and different years and the quality and the how that changes based on weather and a host of other factors. And I want to think about, ideally all agricultural products in the same way, saying, some tomatoes, some years tomatoes might be better, certain tomatoes might be better for salsa, some might be better for eating whole. And I don't know if that's a great example, but I think you get the idea that, there's fine linen textiles that can be made, there's more durable weight textiles that can be made, and there's even kind of coarser like jute rugs and rope that can be made from these same materials. So all of that in mind, I did some math. I call it meta math because it's taking, okay, how many seeds per acre, how many acres per whatever, and trying to just come up with a number to give people context. And growing at a commercial scale, so an experienced farmer who has kind of the best conditions, the best seed stock, and is engaging with manufacturing partners that are highly skilled. It's kind of an astonishing number, but 1 acre of cultivated flax can produce, it's a big number and it's a big range, but given these different considerations, 1 acre of fiber flax can produce between 300 and 500 king size flat sheets. So king size flat sheet, that's a more standard unit rather than just saying a shirt or a dress. And I think, yeah, we're all kind of familiar with that. But lots of different things to consider, but it's kind of an astonishing number, just 300 to 500 king size flat sheets from 1 acre of flax. Okay, so my vision for the Foothills Flax Project. Um, Really, I do see this as the potential to be Colorado's next green rush, one that is both economically and environmentally beneficial. When I think about the green rush, I think about the hemp and marijuana industry and how, folks were really excited about the potential of having hemp fiber production. But the challenge there is the same challenge that we're still facing with linen. It's that the entire American textile production industry was offshored in the 90s and early 2000s due to like NAFTA trade agreements, and just seeing how it's cheaper labor overseas, and we can reallocate that land to other things. So currently, this isn't just true of flax and linen, it's also true of cotton and wool. There's not any commercial scale production from field to fabric happening currently in the United States. Last year, I think whenever there was the tariff scare, I started seeing small businesses really talking about how import costs are affecting their business. And I'm also seeing incentives for job creation and new manufacturing industries. So, um, yeah, it's sort of interesting that I am approaching, a domestic textile market through the lens of sustainability and kind of social and environmental benefit. But the current administration is actually setting up incentives to make this a really viable business opportunity as well. So beyond just kind of bringing our textile production back to the United States, this crop, I think, has real potential to uplift generational farmers. So, folks who are beginning to or continuing to get on board with the regenerative and agricultural practices, we see people cover cropping with flax. The USDA is actually recommending flax as a cover crop to prevent soil erosion, benefit soil health, so on and so forth. The crux there is that they're not recommending a specific fiber variety, and the seeding rate would have to be a little bit denser for flax. But if you can just imagine, this thing that farmers are already doing, they're already planting seeds for a cover crop and not getting any direct financial return on that effort. Converting their cover crop to one that has a really high revenue potential, I think, is just, I don't know, it feels brilliant to me. Um, so not just using flax as a cover crop for soil health reasons, but also economic reasons. Um, there's a significant contingency of grain farmers in Colorado. I've been speaking with the Colorado Grain Chain about this and have uncovered that flax historically was actually rotated with grains and potatoes. So it's kind of the opportunity is really right in front of us. And right now I'm still looking at, what is the best variety, how to do it. I'm doing it at a very small scale, still engaging in this proof of concept to show that look, what grows here can actually be used for something. But stewarding some of those conversations with farmers and looking to get a proper farmer trial next year. So ultimately, the goal is to produce the best, most sustainable linen on the market. I mentioned spurring economic growth and job creation through the manufacturing and processing industry. Um, Myself as an example of the industry and consumer demand for sustainable domestic textiles, and just the fact that this is an industry that we're seeing grow year over year, both internationally. It's valued at $2.2 billion, and in the United States, and it's an $84 million market that's growing. I think those numbers right now reflect that there is not currently product available for people to be actively purchasing and demanding, but I definitely see things moving in that way. And as a business analyst, as somebody with a master's in sustainable business practices, I recognize that the terms best and most sustainable are not defined, and that is something that I'm looking to define. So, thinking about the best, just thinking about the quality, and most sustainable, for the long term, wanting to approach it not as something that is just able to be grown and made and used and discarded, but thinking about the full value chain and life cycle of this product. Even the fact that, I'm looking to grow this in a context where there's limited irrigation. If we look to the example of trees and hardwoods that grow with in drier climates, they're slower growing and denser. And I have this, I don't know, kind of latent hypothesis that that might be true of linen too. If it takes longer to grow, it might be more durable. So stay tuned. Okay, so a little bit more about where we are right now. So I have 5 active test plots for 2026. I just did the math, and it's about 1,500 square feet. I am still working in feet rather than acres at the time for the time. But this is, a 10x increase over what was planted last year. And it was a lot for me to tend and harvest just in 2 different locations. So 5 test plots are keeping me very busy. Um, it just occurred to me that I could have included, I have some diagrams and plot maps of what they look like and what the different varieties that I'm growing at each site are, but I can share those or, yeah, maybe come back to that later if there's specific questions. Oops. So yes, a 10x increase over last year already. I guess, we're kind of 2/3 the way through the season right now, and definitely seeing varieties or variations among different locations and types within each location. I'll touch a little bit more on the specifics whenever I get to the flax at Jack section. And right now, I'm still really engaged in an awareness campaign. So, literally just talking to people and telling them that linen is made from flax continues to be revelatory to people. It's something that people don't often think about. And then again, they start to ask these same questions like the same flax that I eat, the flax that grows wild here. And it's a yes and sort of question, but the awareness campaign is a major part of what I'm doing right now, part of this educational lunch and learn that we're having, and also looking to establish some processing workshops and different opportunities for engagement. So I have volunteer opportunities, whether it's tending in the garden or people want to kind of learn together how to take flax into its textile form. This year, my goal this year is to formally incorporate as a nonprofit. Right now, I've been running this project through my upholstery, sewing and upholstery business, which I don't know what the IRS would say about that, but I think it's sort of relevant, kind of connected the textile work part of it. Continuing research on cultivation, I think having Carolita's insight and commentary on how I'm kind of structuring and the different points that I'm recording has been really helpful. With my background in data analytics, I know these numbers are really important, and then I hesitate when we're talking about like, well, how much did you water? And I'm like, I'm watering by hand. How do we measure that? And so there's all these different ways to kind of adjust and just address how much I'm doing, what I'm doing, when I'm doing it, and create like informed, intelligent conclusions from that. But continuing to build out a network of growers ultimately. So I want to incorporate as a nonprofit under the name of Rocky Mountain Linen, which I hope to be an educational and resource agency for commercial growers down the road, and building out that network, getting farmers just raising awareness that, hey, like this is what I'm doing. Is this something that you would be interested in? This is an opportunity that could be beneficial to your bottom line and your entire operation. Um, so through that, and again, just building out uh, the awareness in the community, looking to or hoping to connect with some folks who are in a position to down the road help establish some processing infrastructure. So made some great connections with engineers and biochemists that are studying different facets of commercialization, and hope that those will come to fruition relatively soon. Okay, so from land to linen, the big question, how does flax become fabric? So it's very involved. I am going to address this from like a kind of a colonial era hand processing perspective, because that's what I'm looking to engage in, planning to engage in, and frankly, that's what's available to us right now. There's some small kind of inventors in Canada and in the UK that are developing kind of intermediate processing equipment, still at a manual scale, but something that just kind of expedites the manual processing aspect of it. And currently, like I mentioned earlier, there's no commercial uh, milling available for flax in the United States. So one of the distinctions between cotton and wool and say flax or hemp, flax and hemp are considered long staple length based fiber. So it's a much longer thread than that you would have rather than wool or cotton. For example, wool, I think a local mill told me that they don't take anything that's less than 4 inches. And I think 3 to 4 inches is kind of a standard for whenever you shear the wool, how long their wool is. And flax is, 3 to 4 feet long, and hemp even longer than that. So just the equipment that is available and currently on the market to process, whether it's spinning or weaving, those different things, there's a huge gap. I would love to see some equipment that can be adjusted with a simple switch or very simply to be able to handle both. But we're not there yet, and I'm not an engineer. So the hand processing, just check time here. Um, yes, so harvesting and drying. So the first step is to pull it all up by the root. You can see these beautifully tied bushels have the seed heads on them, as well as the roots still intact. So that's one of the challenges and things to look at from um, a commercial agriculture perspective is, does flax need to be pulled up by the root? Historically, they say yes, because that just lengthens the total length of the fiber that's extruded ultimately. But there's some folks that have been doing this for a long time who say there's almost no fiber in the root of the stalk. So whether we can reallocate, let's say, hay cutting equipment to be used for flax cutting, it's a question that's out there. But currently, the first step is to harvest. You pull it up by the root and you let it out, lay it out in the sun to dry. So this is the first drying. Rippling, again, this may or may not be relevant depending on when flax is being harvested, who's harvesting it. But rippling is just removing the seed pods from the flax stem. So those seed pods there are what contain the flax seeds that we eat. There's 6 to 10 seeds on average per seed pod, and from a single stem from a single seed, I've seen have over 40 seed pods on it. So, you could eat that one seed or you could plant it and have a 400x number at the end of your harvest. Then the redding process. So there's two different ways to go about redding, and redding is considered the most crucial component of processing. It's kind of like rotting, essentially. And it is, if you can imagine like a waterlogged tree trunk kind of in a stream or something where the bark starts to separate from the wood underneath it. That's what the retting process is doing to the flax stalk. So here's an image of field retting, the same way that hay is cut and left to dry out in the field. This is what you would do with flax in a field retting scenario. There's some different considerations for whether field retting is appropriate in our location, depending on moisture, but there's some different conversations I'm having around that. The other common method of retting is to do tank retting, which is just kind of soaking flax in a tank of water. Both of these have different environmental considerations for water use and what you do with the water. And yeah, it's kind of the next thing that I'm really excited to dig into, kind of all of the problems and challenges that opportunities that we have to innovate here. So after the retting, there's an additional drying stage. And once that is complete, then we get into breaking. So this is a break that this person is quite literally just pulling that bundle of flax underneath or between those pieces of wood, and the wood is crushing the stems to make it easier to remove that outer husk of the fiber stem. Sketching is just kind of scraping off the chive is what they call it, the chive from the fiber that remains. And then we get into hackling. And I think this is so fun to talk about because prior to getting into linen production, I'd only heard the term hackle in terms of like a cat raising the hackles on its back. And you can see these, beds of nails look like the spiky hair on a cat's back. And what's happening is that they're pulling flax through progressively finer combs, basically, to separate it and get it prepared for spinning. This fiber here, this is just considered shed, but it's specifically referred to as tow fiber. So this is the longer fiber that will become linen. And this is tow fiber, which used to be used to make linoleum and has, a number of different commercial and industrial uses. And at the end of hackling, you're left with these stricks. Um, you talk about like flaxen-haired maidens, and the flax quite literally looks like blonde hair here. So from those stricks, we then get into the spinning and weaving to produce textiles. Um, so quite a labor-intensive process. And I'm nearing the end of the materials that I have here. So if you have questions, please unmute yourselves and you can feel free to start to engage. But these are just a few photos that I have from Jax, the work that I'm doing at Jax. And you can see, just the initial germination there between April 21st and May 9th that happened in that time window. We had a pretty big snowstorm, and I was pretty concerned about the flax babies and what would happen. And honestly, just growing under the solar panels has been just a shift in kind of understanding and knowing how much tending they need or don't. I'm a bit of a helicopter flax mom, wanting to check on them every day and just in awe of the rapid growth and maturation. And it's really just a joy to be out there under the solar panels, seeing things growing and flourishing. And yeah, I went away on a retreat earlier this month and came back and saw the first flower at Jack's on last Wednesday, and was really delighted by that. And then 2 days later, I showed up just to give them a light water as well, and the blooms are really starting to explode. So, sort of a magnificent display that just brings me so much joy, and I hope that you all feel that too. Um, I think there's a couple of main observations between what I've seen at Jack's and some of the other places, but primarily um, it's the need to water. It's really an exceptional case study just in how this flax is doing compared to a more traditional farm setting that is completely exposed to the sun and the wind. This same variety that started blooming on June 17th, it's about 2 feet tall right now. I have it also growing along the Foothills Highway, and the same variety. It also started flowering, but it's about 8 inches. So you can see these plants in real time responding to the conditions that they're growing in. And yeah, I look forward to seeing what fiber quality will emerge from this year's harvest. And ultimately, I hope to expand my footprint a little bit next year just to, um, yeah, continue to see flowers blooming. And really, I'm also excited about the potential for this to be a really great companion crop for additional solar arrays, thinking that, it's much less tending than, say, a vegetable crop. It's more of a field crop that for Colorado, it's doing really well in a setting that has some sun protection. So I should mention the other sort of flax projects that are happening in the country are in much more temperate regions in the Northeast and the Northwest, where there's just more moisture, more humidity. Um, and growing here, I think, was really inspired by the fact that we have a variety of flax. It's a native wildflower. So ultimately, again, looking to retain those genetics year over year and have something that is adapted to our region. And um, yeah, doing that in an agrivoltaic setting is a really exciting opportunity. All
Thanks
right.
so
So,
much, Ashley.
thank you.
Um, I think we'll do some questions. I think that last observation you just gave about like its potential in solar is really cool because I don't know. I wonder if maybe due to its height, it's maybe not considered in pollinator habitat as much within arrays, but maybe those hybrid varieties could be more considered. And then it's like a great byproduct that can not only be for habitat, but for more product and textile and nutritional harvesting too. So
Yeah.
cool. Feel free to shoot away, folks.
Yeah, I
That
have.
was so interesting. Thank you so much. I was totally unaware of this process, so that was really informative for me. I was curious around what time period the harvesting is, and then those periods after that you went through of all the different steps it takes to turn it into linen and textile. How long does that process typically take? I'm sure it varies based on how many people you have working, but
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to talk about like the time for processing, which I'll get into. But for the crop from planting to harvest, it's typically recommended or considered a 90 to 100 day crop. So 3 short months. Um, the planting time frame, I had a target plant date of April 15th just based off of things that I had read last year. But after the really warm winter, I was eager to get some planting done even earlier. And I read a book that sort of talked about a less technical approach to flax planting, kind of olden days, where they would time it between the spring equinox and Easter Sunday. So, this year that was the end of March and beginning of April. So I think it's one of those things that it's like a farmer intuition sort of thing of when you want to grow. As far as the time of year, I think the region and climate is going to be a huge factor in that. I see people that are planting in November to be harvesting in March or April because of their seasonality, or they're just in a warmer climate that gets more moisture that time of year. Typically, it's planted early spring and harvested by July. Um, yeah, so it's a brief and spectacular show of flowers. A fun fact that I love to mention is that each of those flowers only lasts for a single day. So you'll see them open up in the early morning and the cool temperatures. By the time the sun gets up high and it starts to really warm things up, those petals start to fall. But each of those flowers then becomes a seed pod, and most often you'll see additional kind of seeds and flowers come from the same stem. So it's kind of I don't know, like fireworks is kind of how I think of it, just continuing to blossom and open. Um, yeah, and I think the next couple of weeks are going to be really beautiful at the solar garden. As far as timing, so I have to confess I have not yet engaged with processing last year's harvest into textiles. I've been a little bit gun shy, spending 4 months growing something and tending it daily, and then I'm a little bit scared of ruining it,
That's
messing
so
up.
fair.
So I think, I'll do it. This year I want some people alongside me that are excited about the experimentation and learning process of it all. The field redding component or the redding component is the most, I think, time bound. So I mentioned like looking into some additional methods for field redding, one of which is applying using microbes to help accelerate the redding process. And whether that can be applied in a field, like if you have this microbial solution that is basically an organic fertilizer sprayed over a field that could be beneficial both to accelerating the redding as well as the soil that's underneath it. So whereas my initial thought was that field redding isn't feasible in Colorado because it's so dry, field redding or dew redding, it's also called, we don't get a lot of dew in the mornings. Um, this idea of having this microbial agent applied to it could make that possible. So just some quick numbers. Field redding, dew redding, it's going to be very variable since you're relying on nature and weather. And I've heard it can take about 10 weeks to do the field redding. You need to turn it so that it kind of evenly starts to decompose. The microbes that are in the soil can kind of do their magic. So 10 weeks for field redding, tank redding, about 10 days. And this, again, it's an astonishing figure. And I'm a little bit hesitant because I haven't tried it myself, but just to speak to the potential, redding with a microbial agent can happen in a factor of hours. So from weeks to hours, that's a pretty compelling experiment to investigate further. Um, One thing that's different that I've learned is different between flax and hemp processing for turning into textiles. Somebody told me that their experience with hemp is that it has to take place, from farm to processing facility. They have 150 miles to get to because it's such an oily crop that if it's traveling longer distances than that, it starts to degrade and decompose or yeah, the oils start to become an issue, but flax can be dried and kind of stored indefinitely. So drying can help the seed pods mature to have more viable seed pods or seed stock for the following year. Um, but yeah, I feel assured that the last year's harvest will do just fine to wait until this year's harvest is ready for processing as well.
Sweet, thank you.
Any other questions for Ashley?
More just a comment. Really appreciate the ethos you approach this whole project with, as far as the activism stance and having such a great positive attitude.
Thank you. It's definitely been humbling. I mean, just from like planting seeds and feeling like I'm spending hours a day watering dirt, not knowing if anything's going to germinate, to yeah, like being gone for a week and coming back to the weeds. And there's, I'm a kind of a one woman show right now. I feel very grateful to the volunteers and other folks that have stepped up in my absence to help water or just keep eyes on plants at different sites. But really, it's this sort of engagement and the response that I get from meeting people whenever I talk about it that really keeps me going. So thank you, Michelle.
Yay.
I saw you have classrooms for climate action listed under your like support from community, and I'm wondering if you're doing any work with them with students too.
So that was a sort of an initial outreach. That's one of the things I need to do is update my website, include kind of Jack's on there and some of the other places I'm going. That was the early first presentation that I did to the entire ninth grade class at Peak to Peak last year, and climate or Classroom for Climate Action helped me get into in front of that audience. And the timing was terrible. It was a really exciting opportunity. I was really excited about the potential for it. But they were hoping to plant the last week of school, and it didn't really, I wasn't able to be as present as I wanted to. And ultimately, what they planted, they're planting as school is ending and they're all going home for summer. So nobody is kind of assigned the responsibility of tending it. Um, but yeah, it was really exciting to hear to get in front of some teenagers and talk about, textiles and the environment. It was their ninth grade innovations class. They're looking at opportunities for, yeah, I think like sustainable, environmentally friendly innovation. And so it's not an active partnership in this moment, but yeah, really grateful to have been able to present to them.
Well, I think we kind of have a hard cutoff at 1, but if anyone has any lingering questions, feel free to reach out for me, or you have Ashley's contact now. And hopefully, as folks are doing tours or more engagement on site, you have more information to share about Ashley's project. And Ashley has a newsletter of her own, so definitely sign up for that. And then I'm hoping to do more like highlights on folks through a new kind of salsa spotlight situation. FYI, Ashley, haven't told you that yet, but hopefully that's cool.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, we'll continue keeping up to date on this project, and I'm super excited to hear about it. And I think um, it's this crop similarity to haying will be really interesting to see as you go into like the post like cut down like tedding and redding, what do you call it, yeah,
right.
redding
Yeah,
part, because there's I feel like you should talk to Byron about that, because there's been some interesting results about haying under solar rays just because of the increase in moisture. Like for hay, it's not that great because it's really moist and you don't want it to rot for like livestock feed, right? But
yeah,
if you're going for that like microbial decomp situation for your, it could be like um a better process and a better environment for that. So I'd be really curious to see how that goes, but we can talk about that at another time.
yeah. Thank you so much for saying that, because like as I was saying, field writing doesn't really work here. I had the thought and then totally kind of forgot about the fact that that's what Jax was.
Yeah, yeah. Cool.
I,
Sweet. Well, hopefully we can do more of these too. And if folks liked this, maybe we can get our other salsa guys on here as well. But happy Monday to everyone. And Ashley, if you have 5 minutes, maybe we can stay on the call and catch up on some stuff.
for sure. Yeah. Thank you all for your
Cool.
time. Please reach out with any questions. Say hi if you see me over there. And just know that uh, it's about 30 days to harvest. So the next month, the flowers are going to be exploding. If you don't have plans to get over there, try to get over there and to see it. And it's going to be gone sooner than you think. So thanks again.
Sweet. Bye, everyone.
Thank